and welcome back. Dear learners, in this series we have been discussing about the nature and structure of the Russian language. We have also discussed about the Russian alphabet. In Russian alphabet, as we know that we have 33 letters, out of which we have 21 consonants and 10 vowels. As you know that in Russian language the usage of personal pronouns, possessive pronouns and demonstrative pronouns have also been discussed, as we have discussed them in prepositional case in the last lessons. You have seen that how the possessive pronouns, personal pronouns and the demonstrative pronouns are being used, especially when the questions of acom and achiom are asked. Personal pronouns like ya, ti, on, ana, mui, vui and ani are being asked. Accordingly, they are being changed when they are asked with questions achiom and akom. Accordingly, abamnie, achibie, anas, avas and anik are being used, and accordingly anyom and anye for on and ana are being changed accordingly. In the possessive pronouns, we have seen the usage of moi, toi, nash, vash and ik along with yivo and nio, and we have seen that how the usage of soi, soya, soyo and soi are used in prepositional case. In the last series, we have also talked about certain verbs which are being used in Russian, especially in the case called the prepositional case, where we are using questions like где and akom and achiom. Before that, if you remember, we have discussed about the usage of certain verbs called glagoli движения. Glagoli движения or the verbs of motion, which play a very important role in our day-to-day communication in Russian. As you know that we have two categories called ichi khajich and yekhach and yezdich in Russian. Ichi and khajich, which belongs to the first group, which means to go on foot, as ichi means to go in one direction as well as khajich means to go in multiple directions. Likewise, for yekhach and yezdich, the only difference is that yekhach and yezdich are being used when we indicate a movement by transport. Dear learners, as we have promised that beyond the usage of verbs, words and expressions, we will be discussing about certain other such exceptions in Russian, like we have discussed about them when we did the first case, especially during having our sessions regarding the prepositional case. We have seen that while using prepositions like va and na, which means in, at or on depending upon the context, there are certain exceptions like sad changes into sadu, les changes into flissu, and accordingly as per the gender of the nouns, the adjective of these nouns are changing. But when we saw that how these adjective and noun endings are used with akom and achiom, we have seen that in place of prepositions we drop them and place a, ab and abo. As you know that a is used with general nouns and adjectives, whereas ab is used with adjectives which are starting with a vowel. Accordingly, we have also seen the usage of pronouns. As we have already discussed about personal pronouns and possessive pronouns, we have also discussed about the demonstrative pronouns, where we use etat, eta, eta and echi. Ya dumаю ab etam institute. Here the first example talks about etat. It has been changing into etam because institute achiom is being asked from the masculine gender. That is why institute or universitet, for example, will be changing into ya gavriu ab etam universitete. Ya думаю об этой девушке. It is another example of a noun of feminine gender, where eta has been used. and accordingly it has been changing into एतय. And for neuter gender, as you already know, या गवरु अब एतम पिस्मिये. Here again the demonstrative noun eta will be changing as per the rules applied when we change the endings of adjectives and nouns of such achom and akom qualifying nouns and adjectives in prepositional case. I hope you will all remember these aspects, and now as we promised that we will be discussing more about the verbs of motion here in this section, which is specially designed and developed for the learners. We will be discussing about the verbs of motion in detail in this lesson. So, shall we go ahead? Dear learners, as you already know that glagoli движения, which means verbs of motion, is an instrumental role of the Russian language, which plays a very significant role in its overall usage. This important aspect of verbs usage in Russian is of utmost importance because it is indicating the movement, whether on foot or by transport. It comes with its own package because in this thing we will be discussing about that how certain genders like the masculine, feminine and neuter are changing. For example, in the verbs of motion we have ichi khajij and ye khajij, and accordingly whenever we are using nouns of masculine gender or feminine gender, they undergo some changes. We pay attention to the first slide, where with the example of the usage of verbs of motion we can understand how and when to use verbs of motion, what is the role and what is the need of verbs of motion in day to day Russian. As you know that for movement we have been using a question kuda, which means where to, whereas we have used question gijie to indicate a place, or it simply means where. In this lesson we will talk about the usage of kuda. We will also compare it with gijie. As you know that in Russian, as we are talking about, that there are certain categories of verbs which are identified by their endings, and then there are certain verbs which are totally used in this special category, which is called verbs of motion. But these verbs or the verbs of motion are conjugated like we have conjugating the verbs in general, as ichi and khajij will also be conjugated in the same fashion. Here, as we have discussed about ichi and khajij, we have a fair idea what is the meaning of ichi and what khajij means. The verb ichi, which means to go on foot, it indicates movement in a single direction. Let us understand this with this example. Ichi, moj brat idет na stadion. If you pay attention to this sentence, clearly we have used a preposition na in this case. Moj brat idет na stadion. If I need to ask a question, I would use kuda. Kuda idет tvoj brat? Kuda idет vash brat? Depending upon whom you are asking this question, we are free to use tvoj brat or vash brat. It depends upon the context. In answer to it, we use moj brat idет na stadion, and here ichi has been used in its conjugated form for brat. Moj brat idет na stadion, and here while using the prepositions there is no change in the noun stadion. Had it been in the gijie or the prepositional form, it would have been changing into na stagione. So, accordingly please remember what are the special cases when we are using verbs of motion with preposition. Let us go to the next slide and understand when to use ходить. Ходить. Каждый день он ходит на стадион. Here again we have used preposition na stadion. Na, which indicates place of an action, it is a preposition. Na stadion means at or to the stadium. Каждый день мой брат ходит на стадион. It is important to use such important words like каждый день, часто, etc. and whenever they are used in a sentence, we need to use ходить in its own conjugated form. For example, we can have several examples like каждый день я хожу в институт. Каждый день он ходит на завод. Каждый день мой папа ходит в office. So, accordingly, you can use these kind of examples with certain nouns and идти and ходить are being conjugated accordingly. For example, идти can also be used. Моя сестра идет в кино or моя мама идет в парк. So, accordingly, you can also use идти in its own conjugated form, but it is on the same direction as single direction, whereas ходить has been used to indicate multiple directions. Он идет, она идет, but он ходит, она ходит. Let's listen to how these verbs are being conjugated. Идти, я иду, ты идешь, он, она идет, мы идем, вы идете, and они идут. Whereas we use ходить as я хожу, ты ходишь, он, она ходит, мы ходим, вы ходите, and они ходят. You might find that these verbs are being conjugated in a slightly different manner, but more or less they are being conjugated like we have conjugated читать, жить, etc. Я живу, я иду accordingly. Я читаю, я хожу. So, there is a slight difference, but more or less the fundamentals are same. You can also conjugate these verbs and use them in your own sentences and expressions. Let us go to the next section with a few examples. We will try to understand them in a better way. With the help of this text, where we have used идти and ходить in several conjugated forms, we will be able to understand several new words and expressions. Please pay attention to the words and expressions in this text and especially to the usage of verbs of motion. Please pay attention to the conjugation of verbs as well as the use of prepositions and the changes being made in the ending of the noun. Каждое воскресенье, если погода хорошая, мы ходим в соседний лес. Every Sunday, if the weather is good, we go to the neighboring forest. If you remember that in the preposition case for forest we have a word les. Whenever it is used with the preposition в лесу, but whenever it is used with глаголе движения, it remains в лес. That is why каждое лето мы ходим в соседний лес. It doesn't change. Этот лес очень красивый, большой и густой. This particular forest is very beautiful, big and густой, which means it is dense. So, we are talking about a particular forest, that is why a demonstrative pronoun этот has been used here. Please pay attention to the next line. Туда ходят разные люди. Here we have used the conjugated form for они for ходить, that is why we have used туда ходят разные люди. Different kind of people go there. Некоторые сидят на скамейке, некоторые гуляют. Many of them sit on the table, on the bench. You can use and a few of them they walk around. Разговаривают, поют песни. They talk with each other and sing songs. Here, if you pay attention to the usage of verbs, we have used ходить in its many conjugated forms. You have also seen that how in the initial lines we have used prepositions, and you have also find out that what is the difference between when the prepositions are being used when the question is где and when the question is куда. Каждое лето мы ходим в лес. Accordingly, you can also use certain examples in your own expressions. Let us go to the next slide now and understand this text and the meaning of these words and expressions while I read it for you. Иногда люди лежат прямо на траве и читают книги. Sometimes people they lie straight on the grass and read books. Here again we have seen that we have used the conjugated form of лежать, люди лежат, and читать, люди читают книги. В лесу есть небольшое озеро. Люди тут гуляют, отдыхают, собирают грибы, купаются в озере. So here accordingly we have used there в лесу. So you can use at the forest, people are taking rest, reading books, they are collecting mushrooms, etc. as per the text. В лесу есть небольшое озеро. In the forest there is a lake. Люди тут гуляют. People are walking or strolling there. Отдыхают, they are taking rest. Собирают грибы, they are collecting mushrooms. Купаются в озере and bathing in the lake. Рядом есть маленький детский парк. Not far there is a small children's park. Там дети играют, катаются на велосипеде, and there children are playing and they are riding bicycle. Лес – это прекрасное место для отдыха. That is why the forest is a wonderful place for taking rest or simply for holidaying. As you know that we know a verb отдыхать, and from it we have a noun отдых, and when we use для, it is basically used in rajicilni padyesh or genitive case, and we use this form для отдыха, для брата, and accordingly other genders like the feminine and neuter are changed. We will be discussing more about the usage in its own dedicated lessons. But before that, since we are talking about the usage of где and куда, we have seen that for лезь we have used preposition в лесу, whereas when we used it when the question is куда, we said мы каждое лето ходим в лес, and accordingly you can also find out that there are certain such examples like we have just done, that где играют дети, дети играют в парке. Куда дети ходят в парк. Accordingly, you must pay attention to these aspects and understand the meaning, whether it has been asked for куда or it has been asked for где. Since it will be asked by these questions first, and then only you will be answering with the usage of either the verbs of motions or general verbs which are used in the prepositional case. Let us learn a few new more words and expressions which are being used in this lesson. Please pay attention to the spellings and the pronunciation of these words. As you already know that the most important role in any word is being played by the stress. These stress signs are of the most importance. New words, каждое, every. Well, since it has been used in the lesson with каждое лето or каждое утро, for example, that is why каждый has been changed into каждое. For example, if you want to use каждый with день, you will use каждый день. Accordingly, you have used каждое utra or каждое лето. If has been a feminine gender noun, for example, каждая неделя, you would have used it accordingly. Let us listen to a few more new Russian words and expressions. Pagoda, which means weather. You can also use pagoda with certain adjectives. Сегодня очень хорошая погода. Today it's a very good weather. Сегодня очень плохая погода. Today it's a very bad weather. Погода в Индии всегда бывает хорошая. In India, the weather is always good. So accordingly, в России погода бывает холодная. In Russia, the weather is cold. And such other examples with the noun pagoda can be used. Please pay attention to the next. This expression, соседний лес. Here we have used the noun les, which means forest, with соседний, which means the neighboring forest. Again, you can use many other such adjectives like хороший лес, плохой лес, большой лес, маленький лес, густой лес, так далее, etc. And accordingly, you can use these kind of expressions while making your own texts or dialogues. Let us listen to the next. Густое, which means dense. Этот лес очень густой. This particular forest is very dense. Accordingly, the next word which I have used being here is разные, which means different. Разные люди живут в Индии. There are many kind of people live in India. Разные страны, because it is in plural, that is why страна has been changed into страны. Разные страны в мире существуют. Many countries exist in this world, and accordingly you can also make your own sentences. Let us go to the next word, люди. As you already know that люди is always plural. That is why we always use conjugated form of a verb in any form. Эти люди любят читать новую книгу. These people, they love to read new book. So accordingly, you can also have your own new expressions. Скамейка, which means bench. Accordingly, you can use adjectives for скамейка like хорошая скамейка, большая, дорогая, недорогая, accordingly. Иногда, which means at times, sometimes, not oftenly. So иногда у нас бывают гости, and accordingly you can have your own sentences being made in the same fashion. These were some of the words and expression which we used in this particular text. As you know that in this text we have used several other expressions. As you know that through text only we are trying to make you understand the usage of words and expressions as well as how do we conjugate verbs. Plus we have also tried that through the text only how to understand the Russian speech and the exact meaning, because sometimes since we are translating the text into English, sometimes there are several meanings which are being expressed through the recipient language, but it is important to feel the native language or the source language, because in that particular language whatever the emotions being expressed through the usage of words, verbs and expressions are to it, and that is why it is important to understand the exact meaning of these words, verbs and expressions. Let us go to the next slide so that we can understand a few more new Russian words and expressions which are being used through these texts. Like we have certain examples, прямо, which means directly, trava means grass. As we already know that there is a word zillioni which means green. So if you want to say this is green grass, so we use это зеленая трава. Accordingly, for lake we have word in Russian озеро. Большое озеро, маленькое озеро can be used. Accordingly, we have a verb in it, собирать. Каждый год мы собираем грибы, every year we collect mushrooms. Gribi has been used in its plural form, that is why it has been used as mushrooms. And then another verb kupatsa, which means to swim. Jechi kupayutsa v ozera. So, you can also make such kind of your own expressions while using them in your text or dialogues. Then we have expression katatsa na velosipede. So, velosipede means to ride a bicycle. Katatsa na velosipede. Jechi katayutsa na velosipede. Children, they ride bicycle. Prekrasna has been used. So, this exclamation, this kind of word can also be used while greeting with each other. Это была прекрасно встретиться с вами. It was wonderful meeting you. Это была прекрасный опыт. This was a wonderful experience. Он прекрасный человек. He is a wonderful man. Она прекрасная девушка. She is a wonderful woman. Accordingly, you can use these kind of important expressions in your own day-to-day communication in Russian. Let us go to the last word which has been used in this text as отдых, which means rest, as that горы они очень хорошие для отдыха. The hills are very good for taking rest. So, these kind of expressions, sentences you can also use in your own dialogues, in your own text, and when talking to your friends and family members, you can use these expressions independently. Dear learners, with this we will be concluding this session and we will be talking more about verbs of motion in detail in the coming lessons. Thank you.